Imagine an army of 10,000 warriors. Their mission was simple: destroy Medina. Inside the city stood only 3,000 Muslims, outnumbered, surrounded, and with nowhere to run. Defeat seemed inevitable. One extraordinary idea changed everything. Not swords, not cavalry, not towering walls, a single trench, a strategy Arabia had never seen before. As arrows darkened the sky, enemies surrounded the city from every side. The Muslims faced one of the greatest tests in Islamic history. Would Medina survive?
How did a small community defeat the largest coalition Arabia had ever assembled? And how did faith, patience, and brilliant strategy change the course of history forever?
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the year 5 AH. That's 627 CE, and we are looking at one of the most incredible underdog stories in history. So paint this picture in your mind. It's been 2 years since the Battle of Uhud. The Muslims survived, sure, but that survival actually kind of emboldened their enemies. The Quraysh, the leaders over in Mecca, thought the Muslims were vulnerable. They wanted one final, devastating strike to finish them off. But, as we're going to see today, what went down completely flipped the script on Arabian history.
Chapter 1, the ultimate threat approaching. In the year 5 AH,
You really have to understand the stakes here. The Quraysh didn't just want to win a skirmish. They wanted to literally erase the Islamic community off the map. You see, Islam was growing, trade in Medina was booming, and the society was getting super organized. The Quraysh knew that if they waited any longer, defeating the Muslims would be downright impossible. So, they traveled all over Arabia. They called in favors, buried old rivalries, and pieced together this massive alliance. Just think about this number, 10,000 fighters. I mean, Arabia had never ever seen so many tribes unite for one single military campaign. The scale of this threat was just terrifying.
this massive, overwhelming coalition became known as Al-Ahzab, which translates to the Confederates. We're talking about the Quraysh teaming up with the powerful Ghatafan tribe, along with a bunch of other groups. And they were all glued together by one incredibly brutal message: destroy Medina before it becomes too powerful. The leaders in Mecca were so hyped about this massive force, they literally thought victory was 100% guaranteed.
Now put yourself in Medina for a second. Imagine the moment scouts and travelers come running in with this news. The entire vibe of the city flipped overnight. Picture the sheer panic in the markets, parents looking terrified for their kids, and literally every single conversation boiling down to one panicked question: how on earth can we defend Medina? Going toe-to-toe with a 10,000-man army in the open desert, that would be absolute suicide. They needed a miracle.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the Muslims reacted. Right in the middle of this chaos, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gathered his companions. He brought together the leaders from the Muhajirun and the Ansar to figure this out. A huge hallmark of his leadership was that he never made a major move without consulting his people. He wanted to hear every single opinion. And during this brainstorm, a companion named Salman Al-Farsi stepped up. Salman had lived in Persia, and he pitched this completely unique defensive tactic: digging a massive trench to block the enemy cavalry. No Arab army had ever done this before. It was a totally alien concept, but the Prophet instantly saw the genius in it and gave it the green light without a second thought. So the Muslims immediately started digging this massive trench right across Medina's exposed northern side, because actually the other sides were naturally protected by thick palm groves and these jagged lava fields.
So the plan was set, but actually pulling it off, that was a grueling, gritty nightmare. The clock was ticking and the Confederate army was already marching across the desert. The weather was freezing cold, the ground was solid rock, and the defenders were literally digging for their lives. But here is where you see just phenomenal leadership. The Prophet didn't just sit back in a comfy tent barking orders. No way. He was right down there in the dirt alongside his companions. He's hauling heavy baskets of soil. He's digging with his own hands until his clothes are just covered in dust. Imagine being freezing and starving, and you look over and see your leader grinding through the exact same hardship. He was reciting poetry, encouraging them, reminding them of a higher purpose. That kind of solidarity, it pushed the companions way past their physical limits.
The physical toll was brutal, for sure, but it was matched by some truly extraordinary moments. At one point, the diggers hit this massive, unbreakable boulder buried in the freezing dirt. The Prophet stepped up and struck it 3 times, completely shattering it. And with every strike, a spark flew, and he gave them glad tidings of future victories, reminding them that all his promised was real. And then there was the hunger. Severe starvation had set in. Guys were literally tying flat stones to their stomachs just to dull the sharp pain of hunger. Even the prophet was doing it. But then, a tiny meal that was only meant for a couple of people miraculously multiplied. The prophet invited all the workers over, and that small bit of food fed everyone until they were completely stuffed. Moments like that absolutely cemented their faith that help was on the way. They finished the trench just in the nick of time. Seriously, right as the dust clouds appeared on the horizon, the 10,000 warriors of the Confederate army rolled up. Now, the Quraysh were fully expecting this to be a walk in the park, a swift, glorious cavalry charge straight into a defenseless Medina. But reality hit them like a brick wall. Their grand charge, it screeched to a dead stop. Instead of a quick win, they were staring down a static, miserable siege, completely blocked by a deep, uncrossable trench. Their horses absolutely refused to jump it. This one Persian tactic threw their entire Arabian military strategy into total chaos, stopping the greatest alliance in history literally in its tracks. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds into an incredibly tense standoff. Day 1 was basically just a bunch of confused arrow shooting and pure shock from the enemy camp. A few days later, a couple of highly skilled horsemen managed to find a narrow choke point to jump across, including this massive, famous warrior named Amr ibn Abd Wood. He shouted out a combat challenge, but Ali ibn Abi Talib stepped up and defeated him right there, proving that even if you got across the trench, it wasn't going to be an easy fight. But then, as the weeks dragged on, a terrifying new threat popped up from the inside. Reports came in that a Jewish tribe living within the Madinah area, Banu Qurayzah, had broken their peace treaty. So now the Muslims are in a complete vice grip, a massive army trying to kill them from the outside, and a terrifying betrayal threatening them from the inside. This dual threat created an unimaginable level of fear. The Quran actually describes it as one of the most intense tests the believers ever went through. Some of the hypocrites completely lost hope. But listen to this. This is what the sincere believers said. This is what Allah and His Messenger promised us, and Allah and His Messenger spoke the truth. It's just a remarkably powerful mindset. Staring down absolute destruction from every possible angle, their faith didn't crack. If anything, it grew even stronger. As those long, frustrating weeks dragged on, the freezing desert nights really took a toll on everyone. But the trench had done its job. It completely neutralized the enemy's biggest asset, their cavalry. So now the Muslims' most powerful weapon was just patience. Out there in the open desert, the Confederate army was having a miserable time. Days turned into weeks, their food was running out, their horses were getting weak, and all those different tribes that made up the alliance, they started turning on each other. Honestly, their massive size just became a huge logistical nightmare. And then, on one unforgettable night, the whole thing unraveled. A massive, freezing windstorm violently ripped through the desert camp. It was total chaos. Tents were being yanked right out of the ground, fires were blown out, sand was blinding the soldiers, and all their essential supplies were just scattered into the pitch-black night. The Quran mentions that forces the enemy couldn't even see were sent against them. In the sheer terror of that storm, the already fragile alliance completely shattered. When dawn finally broke, Abu Sufyan looked around, realized they were entirely ruined, and ordered a full retreat. Just like that, without a single major open battle, this massive 10,000-man army packed up and fled. This epic failure by the Quraysh permanently shifted the power dynamics in Arabia. It proved the Muslims weren't just a small, struggling community anymore, and honestly, the Quraysh would never be able to pull together a coalition like that again. So the crucial point is how perfectly these 5 traits came together to pull off this impossible survival. First, consultation, being open to wisdom, like a Persian military tactic, no matter where it comes from. Second, leadership, having a leader who shares the exact same physical burdens and hunger as his team. Third, patience, holding the line through weeks of freezing, terrifying hardship. Fourth, preparation, putting in the absolute grueling work of digging that trench. And lastly, faith, trusting that if you do the heavy lifting on your end, a higher power will take care of the rest, like sending a massive windstorm. It proves that victory isn't just a numbers game. Which leaves us with this final thought. How can strategy, unity, and unwavering faith help you overcome the impossible odds in your own life? The Battle of the Trench is literally the ultimate underdog story. It's a powerful reminder that when you combine brilliant, practical planning with an unbreakable trust in a higher purpose, you can weather any storm and outlast any siege. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep learning.